This is to help you complete Lab 14, where we are implementing the token machine class. The first thing you need to do is get your GUI set up. So to do that, you're going to click on New Project, and we are going to do a Windows Form application. And then down here at the bottom, make sure you change this to display Lab 14 token machine. Next, we're going to add all of the elements to our GUI. Go ahead and pause the video here, add all of your elements, and then restart the video to continue on. Now that all of your elements are added, we need to create the events. So don't forget, you need a file and exit event, a help and about event, then we need an event for our get token button, and an event for our reset button. So we should have a total of 4 added events in our program. Now, before we write the code here, we want to go ahead and add a class to this. And to do that, we are going to go to the Projects dropdown and choose Add Class. And we should get a dialog box that pops up. Here is class, that's selected, and then we're going to name our class, and we're going to name it Token Machine. And then click on Add. And then you want to use the UML class diagram. You can use the one that's given here to keep it simple. You don't have to use the one that we created before. Once we've added the class, we need to add all of the code that belongs inside. The first thing we're going to do is add all of our member data. And so if we looked at the example in the instructions, we would have private, and then we want an int, and it's going to be called num tokens. And we also want a private int num quarters. Now, usually we are taught that we declare and initialize at the same time. In a class, that's a little bit different. We declare them here, but then we initialize them through the use of a constructor. So we're just going to have them declared. After we have our member data, then we are going to put in our constructors. Now let's do this. Let's kind of mark this out as constructors. Our first constructor is the default constructor. And we're going to set this up just like a method. So we're going to start with the name, and the name of your constructor is the same name as your class. So this is going to be Token Machine. The purpose of this is to set all values to their defaults. The parameters are none, and the returns are none. Okay, and this is the only one where all we are going to have is public and then the name of the class. We don't have a return type on this one. And what's going to happen in here is we're going to set these to the values that the machine would start out at as if it was reset. And it tells us that we're going to start out with the quarters empty and the machine filled with tokens, which would be 100 tokens. So we're going to say num tokens equals 100 and num quarters equals 0. And again, this just sets the initial values for our class. Now the next thing we want to do is add our other methods. So if we look at the example, we would have a reset method, and its purpose is to return all values to their defaults. The parameters on this one, it tells us, are none, and the returns are none. Now, where this is not a constructor, it is going to have a return type. So we would put in public void and then the name, reset. We said it has no parameters. And the thing about reset is it's going to do the exact same thing as we did in our constructor. We're just going to return everything to their default values. So those are going to be the same, but the thing we have to remember is this constructor is automatically called when the class is used inside of our program, so it has to exist even though the code is the same as reset. So it's kind of interesting how that happens. Your constructor is only called once, reset can be called multiple times. Next one we have is get token. The purpose of this one is to do two things. It's going to increase the number of quarters that we have and decrease the number of tokens that we have. So we're going to say that the purpose here is to add quarter to machine and obtain token. Now the parameters on this are none, and the returns on this are none. So we put in public void get token. Now we said this has two jobs. We're going to add quarter to machine, and we are going to remove a token. And it tells us in the instructions that when we put 1 quarter in, 1 token comes out. So this is going to increase quarters by 1, and this is going to decrease tokens by 1. Now I know you guys are going to try to make this code really difficult, but please don't do that. To add a quarter, all you're going to do is say num quarters plus plus. And to remove a token, you're just going to say num tokens minus minus. That's all that has to happen inside get token. Then our next one is count tokens. The purpose of this is to return number of tokens left in machine. Well, let's see, we'll say count number of tokens left in machine. The parameters are none. However, the returns is going to be an integer, so it's actually going to be number of tokens as an integer. So we're going to have public int count tokens. And all this needs to do is return number of tokens in machine. So that means we have one line. Return num tokens. That's all that has to happen. And then our last method is count quarters. And its purpose is to count the number of quarters in the machine. Its parameters are none. And its returns are number of quarters in machine as an integer. So we're going to have public int count quarters. And this only has to return the number of tokens in the machine. So we're simply going to have a return of num quarters. Now this is just a simple class because it's the first one that we've created. We've done a lot of stuff here, so we better save. So let's do a file, save all. And then make sure you save this in your computer programming folder. Okay, once we have our class created, we are ready to add this into our form. So we're going to come here to our form 1. In order to use this, we have to create an instance which creates a link to that class. So we're going to put that right inside of our public partial class, form 1. So right here we're going to say this is a class level reference to a token machine. We are going to put this line of code. We're going to say private, and then we put the name of our class that we're going to call. And this was token machine. And then we give it a name. And it's just like declaring a variable. We're just declaring a link to a class or an instance of a class. So we have to give it a name. Let's do my TM, my token machine. Okay, so that links us back to our class that we just created. Then we have to actually create an object, and we're going to do that inside of our public FRM Lab14. Now, if you forgot to name your form, this would say public form 1. But that would only be what it's called if you forgot to name your form. I named my form, so mine says FRM Lab14. We're going to put this right underneath initialized component. And we're going to create a token machine object. And you'll have a line of code that looks like this. We put in the name of our token machine, which we named it my TM. And we say equals. And when we create an object, we have to add a keyword called new. And then we call the default constructor, which was token machine. And it does not have any parameters. So this is going to create a class object, and then it looks at that constructor and it initializes all of the values like we had it in the constructor. And it's also a good practice, just to be safe, to go ahead and call the reset of your method as soon as you implement it, just in case somebody messed up in the code. So we're going to say myTM dot, and we're going to call the reset method, which this should do the same thing as our constructor, but if for some reason we messed up our code, we've got a backup here by calling reset. Okay, now we would need to add the event handlers where they exist. Now don't forget, when we do this, we need to make sure that we have our name, our purpose, parameters, and returns on every single one of these items here. I'm not going to go into detail on what should be there. You guys should know that. We know how to do our exit tool and our about tool. So let's get a look at our get token. Our get token button is going to do two things. It is going to increase the number of quarters in the machine and decrease our number of tokens, and we did that with a method that we already created in our class. So basically all we're going to do is call that class, or call that method. So we're going to call the get token method, and then we are going to display number of quarters, and we also need to display the number of tokens. So those are the things that need to happen. Okay, so to call our get token method, we would say the name of our object, myTM, dot, and then we call which method, and we wanted to do get token. Now, because of the code that we wrote back in the class, when we call this method, it is automatically going to perform the code, which in that code we told it to add 1 quarter and subtract 1 token. Then we want to display this in our text boxes. So I have to make sure my text boxes were named properly. If they were, I would have a txt quarters dot text equals, and then I would have my method call to return the number of tokens, which we had a method called count tokens. Oh, sorry, we're doing quarters. Count quarters. So we would say myTM dot count quarters. Now the bad thing here is count quarters is going to return an integer, and we need to save this as a string. And so we're going to do something along the lines of, whoops. This, and I don't know if we've done this before. There's a method called toString, and it converts a numeric value to a string. And if we're not worried about doing any formatting, that's the easiest way to do it. Now you could also do it the way we have done in the past, where we did, let's change this, we did a string dot format, and then we did this, and then what we would have here at the end is that. So there's two ways to do it. We can do the call.toString, or we can do this string.format. They're both going to end up with the same, since we're really not changing the format where it's just an integer. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with our number of tokens. So we're going to do txt tokens.text. Now if you did not name your text boxes txt tokens and txt quarters, make sure you choose whatever they were named as and then change the text property. And we're going to do the same thing, string.format. And we are going to call myTM dot count tokens. And it should find the number of tokens and send that back to us, and we will output it as text. Okay, then on our button reset, we are going to call reset method. And then we are going to display the number of quarters, and display the number of tokens. So obviously these last two lines are going to be the same as up above. So when we call our reset method, all we're going to do is myTM.reset. That changes the number of quarters back to 0 and the number of tokens to 100, which is what we started out with. And then we are going to output our number of quarters and our number of tokens. Okay, now we've done a lot again, so save all, and we are probably ready to test this. Now don't forget, you still need to make sure you have your file and exit and help and about working. But let's say I get a token. Notice it increases the number of quarters to 1 and decreases the number of tokens to 99. And every time I click that, the one goes up and the other goes down. Then if I call reset, it sets it back to 0 and 100. So my token machine works exactly as needed. At this point, all you need to do is finish adding all of your method headers and finishing the code that needs to be finished. Now, when you submit this one, I need more files than in any of the others because I need your class included as well. So make sure I get your form1.cs, your executable, and your token class, your token machine.cs. All right, good luck. If any of your parts don't work, make sure you rewind, find your mistakes, fix them, and then turn things in.